In this lesson, we'll take yet another look at learning and forgetting and try to draw some lessons for learners. And we're going to look at the research by Robert Bjork and his colleagues. Many neuroscientists and psychologists study learning and memory. He likes to think of his lab as also studying the process of forgetting. And in his view, there is this common knowledge out there that learning is the storage of information and forgetting is when that information decays. Seems reasonable. He argues that's it's not quite accurate. So he invites us to reconceptualize what forgetting is. And to understand that, we have to think of learning and memory as two processes. There is the issue of storage strength. So we can think of this as how well has the information been inserted into long-term memory, right? Installed into long-term memory. And then there's retrieval strength. And this is a measure of the ease of access to that information. But those are two separate things in Bjork's view. So when we don't use information for a while, so he argues disuse does not lead to decay in the storage strength of the material. Rather, disuse causes a decrease in retrieval strength, the current accessibility of the information. So forgetting is not information just decaying from long-term memory. He argues that forgetting is a loss of access, a loss of the ability to retrieve information that is there in long-term memory. So with these two concepts of storage strength and retrieval strength, we can set up this grid here and think about different types of memories that would fit into these different quadrants. So let's take a look at a high storage strength, high retrieval strength. This would be information, for example, your current address, if you've been living there for a while, your phone number, if you've had it for a while. You know it well, and you can easily retrieve that information. Now that's in contrast, say maybe you moved 5 years ago or something, and 5 years ago you knew your old address very well, but maybe it's not as accessible right now because you haven't been there in 5 years, right? So because you have not used the old address for a while, we lose retrieval strength, although that information was well stored in your long-term memory. On the other hand, we might learn a new friend's phone number, and we just learned it and we're excited about it, so we have high retrieval strength for that information, but we've just encountered that information, so we haven't had time to install it sort of into our long-term memory. So we would say that has low storage strength but high retrieval strength. And then the low condition would be stuff that we learn during the day but forget, right? So we encounter information, and in some brief moment of time we have some access to it, but then we quickly lose that access, and we end up not really making much of a long-term memory out of lots of stuff that happens during the day. So Bjork has a theory of disuse then. So remember, we have storage strength, and he's going to argue that understanding what happens when we forget stuff, the storage strength determines the rate of loss of retrieval strength. And see, if we're losing retrieval strength, in a sense we're forgetting, right? So things that are well stored then, we're going to be able to retain access to that information. And that helps us understand, why do we forget some things faster than others? Because the storage strength is determining the rate of loss of retrieval strength. So if we haven't had a chance to store information well, then we're at risk of losing access to that information. We can see it graphically, storage strength on the bottom here, low, high, rate of loss of retrieval strength. So as storage strength increases, the rate of loss of retrieval strength decreases. Now if you sort of don't like that terminology here on the y-axis, we can change it to this. As storage strength increases, the rate of forgetting decreases. So of course the goal, if we want to retain information and have access to it in the future, we want to store the information well. When it's stored well, our rate of forgetting will be low. If it's not stored well, our rate of forgetting will be high. Now, how do these concepts of storage strength and retrieval strength, how do they relate to effective study strategies? So here, Bjork and his colleagues will make recommendations regarding study strategies and why certain study strategies are more effective than others. And here he's going to get tricky on us now. He's going to identify a counterintuitive relation. Now here it goes, and we'll say this a few times just to make sure we get this. The higher the retrieval strength of some information, the smaller the gains in storage strength with additional practice. In other words, when information is highly accessible, it is difficult to increase storage strength. Now, how does this relate to studying? Well, when we're studying, if we've been studying for a while and we're rereading our notes or rereading our text and so on, that's a condition where retrieval strength will be relatively high. And what he's arguing is that when information is easily accessible, then further study does not increase storage strength as much as when that information would have had low retrieval strength. Now, this sounds, counterintuitive, and we'll have to see what are the implications for studying. Bjork argues that many students have a misconception about learning with respect to these ideas of retrieval strength and storage strength. And so during a study session, students may believe that the ease of retrieval during a study session is a good measure of the long-term storage of the information. Right? And we've seen this in past lessons. Students may have this idea that when they read something and they recognize it and they're familiar with it, they take that as an indication that they know the information well. And Bjork is going to disagree with this. He's going to say this is false. Ease of retrieval is only a good measure if used after a delay. In other words, high retrieval strength during a study session just means high retrieval strength during the study session. What you want to do is create a delay, right, and then try to access that information. And when you create that delay, you're in a sense making it the case that the retrieval strength will be lower than than when you were just studying with your notes open and your text open and everything. So to get a good sense of what Bjork is talking about here, we're going to use some graphs here. And we're going to track retrieval strength and storage strength over time as we engage in our study sessions. Now remember, storage strength is what we sort of think about as long-term memory. So we want to really increase the storage strength. So this one down here is like our long-term memory. And if we want to be sort of real effective learners, we want to maximize our storage of this information. Because remember, how well we store the information affects the rate of loss of retrieval strength, our rate of forgetting. Remember, retrieval strength is just that. It's just your ease of retrieving the information in the current moment. So now let's go ahead and take a look. Let's say we're studying some information, right? So as we read our text or look over our flashcards or study our notes or whatnot, right, our retrieval strength for that information is increasing. We're more familiar with the information. We're having that sense that, yes, we understand this information and it all looks recognizable and we think we understand it. Well, some amount of studying is going to be increasing storage strength. But here's the problem. So students often mistake, Bjork argues, they mistake retrieval strength for storage strength, and then they stop studying. But then the point is not just that they stop studying, because they actually can stop studying here, but that they don't assess later. See, so at this point, students think, well, the information is coming easily to me, I must know it. But the thing is, you've only made modest gains in storage strength. So what students do sometimes is they think that retrieval strength, when it's high, that's an indication that storage strength is high. But no, storage strength is not high. It's a moderate increase in storage strength. So this is a danger, says Bjork, that we misunderstand how learning works. Retrieval strength is not the same as storage strength. The retrieval strength is high here, but we've only modestly increased storage strength. Now, here's the counterintuitive relationship. When retrieval strength is high, then additional practice is less effective. See, notice, if we keep on studying here, well, our retrieval strength remains high, but we're not adding much to our storage strength. And that's that counterintuitive relationship. So in a sense, it is true from Bjork's point of view that we can sort of be ineffective in our study practices if we just prolong a study period when retrieval strength is already high. Prolonging that same study period is not very effective, he argues. Now, let's return up top here, retrieval strength. So now we're going to stop studying, right? And as time goes by, then retrieval strength for that information will diminish, right? So that is a kind of forgetting or a loss of access after our study session. Down here, I've indicated here a little bump in the storage strength because let's say we were studying and then we go to get a good night's sleep. And there's lots of research now that suggests that sleep, among other things, is helping the brain process recently learned information. And so we're going to show a bump in storage strength with sleep, which the take-home message there is to be effective learners, we need to get proper amounts of sleep. Now, notice the arrows here. This was the study session the night before, and then we've got some sleep. Now, suppose we pick up study the next day. See, notice then our retrieval strength for that same information is lower than it was when we were studying the night before. The delay causes a decrease in retrieval strength, which means that a delayed study session will increase storage strength more than extending the original study session. Remember, this is Bjork's counterintuitive relationship. This difference is actually a good thing for the learning process. We want to restudy the information when retrieval strength is low. Because when you study when retrieval strength is low, he argues, we're going to make bigger gains in our storage strength, and we'll see that in a moment. But this is one of the keys to effective studying, says Bjork, is you have to create situations where you give your retrieval strength time to diminish. And inserting delays in your study strategy, just creating delays, causes retrieval strength to go down. But then when you restudy, when retrieval strength is lower, that's better for your long-term storage. So what does that look like? Down here, best retrieval practice is when the retrieval strength is low, right? And notice then when we restudy and we build up our retrieval strength again, it's making a bigger gain in the storage strength. So that difference between high retrieval strength and low retrieval strength, that's a good difference. The delay caused that reduction in retrieval strength, and Bjork calls these things a desirable difficulty. Yeah, it's a little more difficult to retrieve the information here, but that's good for the long-term memory system, because when we restudy, when we retrieve that information, and this active retrieval, not just rereading, actively retrieving the information, then we'll generate a big boost in our storage strength. So one way to think about this is that forgetting is the friend of learning. This forgetting happened because of the delay between study sessions. And when we engage in our second study session, when retrieval strength is lower, then we get large gains in our storage strength. In addition, notice the slopes of the retrieval strength line here and there. Notice there's a faster rate of forgetting, faster rate of loss of retrieval strength here because the overall storage strength is lower. When we have high storage strength, the rate of forgetting or the rate of loss of retrieval strength is slower, right? So the stronger the storage strength, so the larger the storage strength, the slower the rate of forgetting. When it wasn't stored very well, we have a higher rate of forgetting. So one big take-home message from Bjork's point of view is that students must understand that retrieval strength is different than storage strength. We don't want to mistake retrieval strength for storage strength, right? So when we are studying and we have high retrieval strength, that's great. We've made some gains. But then what you want to do is create a delay. There are other ways to uh, lower your retrieval strength by quizzing yourself with difficult retrieval practice questions and so on. But a delay is one of the best ways to do it as well. When you stop studying and then pick up your study sometime later, what is happening is retrieval strength will be lower. And so then when you retrieve information from what you were studying, that's going to cause a larger gain in storage strength. And the reason for this is that there are these different memory systems. There's a short-term memory system and a long-term memory system, and this retrieval strength is more related sort of to the short-term memory system, and it operates under different principles than the long-term memory system. So we have to be knowledgeable about how our memory system really works if we're going to be effective learners. So here are some practical strategies that Bjork might recommend. How best to increase storage strength. Make retrieval difficult. Right? These are like desirable difficulties. So this is, in other words, this is creating conditions of low retrieval strength. Forgetting is the friend of learning. Remember, when retrieval strength is low, then we make bigger gains in our storage strength. One way is to space out the study sessions. By creating the delay, right, then it becomes more difficult to access, to retrieve that information, but that's good. That's a good thing for long-term retention. Using tests rather than rereading. So tests, we've already seen the evidence for this. Retrieval practice, testing yourself, quizzing yourself is more effective than rereading information. Again, you're using brain systems that are different from just the recognition systems when we reread our notes. So tests require retrieval, yes, of information, not simply reprocessing the information. Now, why do these desirable difficulties work? Well, Bjork speculates here that retrieval searches may result in deep processing of the information, making stronger links with relevant information, and we saw this in a previous lesson. That's the idea that when we retrieve information, we're strengthening the links involving that information, because when we retrieve stuff, we have to restore it, and that process strengthens the connections between the information we're trying to learn. Practicing retrieval may make the memory retrieval process itself more effective later by restricting retrieval to the target only and not other distractors. Again, we sort of tried to model that with a diagram in a previous lesson. The more difficult a successful retrieval, the more potent the learning. So the overall message here is that we want to be wise when we approach our studies. We don't want to mistake retrieval strength for storage strength. And once we understand the difference, then we can structure our study sessions so as to maximize storage strength, which is correlated to long-term retention of information. And that should be the goal of effective learners.